Coming up, ICT talks with the Director of Tribal Relations for the USDA on how the department's budget impacts Native nations. Plus,
having this recognition, it is overdue.
We speak with Minnesota Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan about the distinguished honor being given to a White Earth Ojibwe citizen. And we share a few laughs with half of a Navajo comedy duo that has been entertaining Native people for decades. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
Omidawahopa. Thank you for joining us. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Communities are coming together to honor a non-binary Indigenous teen who died in Oklahoma. Over the weekend, memorials for Next Benedict took place in various cities throughout the country. The 16-year-old died earlier this month following an altercation with 3 students in an Owasso High School bathroom. Police say Benedict's death was not the result of injuries from the fight. However, the cause is yet to be determined and an autopsy has yet to be released. Gatherers called out for justice for Benedict and protection for the LGBTQ+ community. Minnesota's Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan told ICT that Oklahoma lawmakers, including Governor Kevin Stitt, are partially to blame.
There are consequences to policy. And the legislation that was passed, advocated for, and signed into law by Governor Stitt regarding the bathroom usage for students, I think that really started the bullying. It started either implicitly or explicitly that kind of behavior is okay. And I know there's still an ongoing investigation, but I think one of the things that we can be really clear about is that the system failed Next Benedict.
We'll hear more from Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan later in our newscast. In Washington, D.C., officials from the federal government have signed a ceremonial agreement for the Columbia River Basin. Last week, the White House Council on Environmental Quality hosted a signing of the December 14th historic agreement. The agreement's purpose is to restore wild salmon, steelhead, and other native fish species to expand tribally sponsored clean energy production. The agreement was signed in partnership with the Columbia River Treaty Tribes, the states of Oregon and Washington, and environmental organizations. According to Yakama Nation Chairman Gerald Lewis, the federal government has failed to maintain the environment from climate and social factors, leaving many tribal citizens without food and energy resources.
We can and must restore Columbia Basin salmon. And working together, we can and will do so in a way that ensures all our communities will have the energy and other resources they need for generations to come.
Well, after a 50-year battle, Washington's Chinook Indian Nation has been awarded land compensation funds. The federal government determined the group will receive more than $48,000 from an Indian Claims Commission judgment. This compensation comes 150 years after the taking of their ancestral lands. Chinook Secretary and Treasurer Rachel Cushman weighed in, saying the money received does not represent the actual value of the nation's ancestral land. Well, a new partnership is hoping to raise awareness about the fight to end drunk driving. Diageo North America is joining MAD, or Mothers Against Drunk Driving, in an educational campaign. In 2022, Diageo worked with Native American, African American, and Latino leaders to create the Multicultural Consortium for Responsible Drinking. Research has shown that alcohol consumption affects ethnic communities differently, which is why 2 web-based tools will provide information on drinking and its consequences. The interactive websites are called Drink IQ and Wrong Side of the Road. Diageo North America is a premium drink business in the U.S. and Canada. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. The U.S. Department of Agriculture's $32 billion budget has a large impact in Native nations, but regulations can sometimes hinder tribal access. There are efforts to change that underway. Stuart Huntington caught up with the department's Director of Tribal Relations, Heather Dawn Thompson, for an update.
I'm Heather Dawn Thompson, Naish Tushunkehiziwi Imachiapi, Malakota, Wakba Washte Oyanke Himatahan. I'm a citizen of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, and I'm honored to be an appointee as the Director of the Office of Tribal Relations in the Secretary's Office at the United States Department of Agriculture.
The administration's first step was a full assessment.
Once we reflected, we realized that many of our programs inadvertently had excluded tribes or tribal producers. One of the biggest ones, I think, was tribal trust lands were inadvertently ineligible for many of our programs. That seems a little crazy when you think about it, since many of our treaties were encouraging tribes to become farmers and producers. But we had accidentally categorized tribal trust lands as federal lands.
Like national parks, forests, or grasslands.
Those lands obviously would not be eligible for federal dollars. And so we fixed that definition. Much of Indian country has national grasslands within its exterior boundaries or adjacent to it, and leases on national grasslands are incredibly important for a lot of our ranchers. And until we changed this rule last year and fixed this definition, those tribes and tribal producers were ineligible for a lot of those grassland leases. 2 additional areas that we identified as inadvertently causing barriers for tribes are in the lack of requirement of tribal consent. This is particularly relevant when you're building out major infrastructure programs like broadband, electrical. USDA has always required that you have rights-of-way in place and permits in place, but we have been less clear that that means not only state rights-of-way and state permits, that also means tribal. So the first time in history, USDA is now requiring tribal consent when you're building out broadband and electricity with USDA funds on tribal lands. And then a third one I wanted to highlight is tribal corporations. Tribal governments don't have a tax base, and so they participate in the private marketplace in order to earn their governmental revenue. They own grocery stores and gas stations and casinos, and they participate in the private marketplace, and that revenue generated funds their government. Unfortunately, many of USDA programs are either for governments or they're for private corporations, and we miscategorize tribal corporations as being neither. Clearly, that's not the solution. And so under this administration, we've been very methodical about making sure that where possible, tribal corporations are eligible for all of those programs.
Another big change came in expanding co-stewardship agreements.
While we have leaned in pretty aggressively into our co-stewardship agreement with state governments, we had not been doing the same thing with tribal governments. And so this administration changed that. In the very beginning, I have to be frank, Stuart, the White House had challenged us to do 6 co-stewardship agreements, and we were nervous. We were not sure if we would be able to achieve that. But the Forest Service has completely changed the way they do business, and in 3 short years, we now have 180 co-stewardship agreements with tribal nations.
Progress, perhaps, but from tribal perspective, not perfection.
Tribes have articulated to the United States that they would at least like to have a 50-50 relationship with 50-50 decision-making, budgeting, staffing. And for the most part, Congress has not given us that authorization yet with federal lands. And so instead, what we do is we lean into areas in which we can collaborate and coordinate together, where we can incorporate tribal and indigenous perspectives into federal decision making, and where we can encourage contracting directly with tribal nations to help steward some of the resources like fire, land management, center management, etc.
I asked if these rules and policy changes were perishable, subject to reversal under a new administration.
While certainly different policy decisions under different administrations could be changed in future administrations, I think all of America realizes that everybody should have the same equal access to USDA. And so, since these were accidental in the first place and not purposeful, it would be odd, to say the least, to change it back so that tribes didn't have the same fair shot as everybody else.
Hotter summers, longer pollen seasons, and record rainfalls. These changing patterns are putting our health and the health of those we love at risk. So, communities around the country are taking steps to prepare. State, local, and tribal health officials are using the Building Resilience Against Climate Effects framework developed by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, called BRACE for short. The 5-step process is used to develop strategies and programs that help communities prepare a coordinated community response to the health effects of a changing climate. Step 1 is identifying what climate effects are relevant locally, how those might lead to new or expanded health threats, and who is most at risk. The next step is to calculate expected impacts on the local population, and then rank the severity of each threat. This is called projecting the disease burden. What it does is it helps health officials tackle the worst risks first. Step 3 is to identify ways the community can intervene to prevent or reduce health effects. For example, health officials who are expecting more high heat days might consider if it would be more effective to open community cooling centers or to collaborate on housing and development plans to protect vulnerable residents. Then in step 4, health officials work with other community sectors to develop and implement their plan. For example, health officials may work with city planners to reduce the impact of urban heat islands, or with broadcast meteorologists to alert people to prepare for extreme weather. Step 5 is evaluation. Health officials assess the success of their adaptation plans and gather lessons learned to apply for future activities. These 5 steps in the BRACE framework are designed to be flexible and responsive to local needs. Any community, whether urban, suburban, rural, or tribal, can use BRACE to prepare for the local health impacts of a changing climate. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/climate and health.
Our next story is about an Anishinaabe man who joins the ranks of other Native American veterans that have been given the distinct honor of having their names on U.S. Navy ships. In 2023, Nisqually citizen and Marine Billy Frank Jr. and Tsimshian citizen and Navy SEAL Sol Atkinson were given the honor. Last week, Navy officials announced its next Navajo-class ship will be named after James D. Fairbanks. The White Earth Ojibwe citizen served in both the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps, and he was the first Native person to ever serve as Force Master Chief Petty Officer, which is the highest-ranking enlisted Navy Seabee. I spoke with Minnesota Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan after she attended a Washington, D.C. dedication ceremony. Take a look. Lieutenant Governor, you are fresh off of your trip to Washington, D.C. for this huge honor. Tell us what the trip was like and the atmosphere of the event.
It was so powerful to be in this space. So we were at the National Museum of the American Indian, and we're able to honor just this incredible man. Force Master Chief James, or Jimmy Fairbanks, as people called him, was a member of the White Earth Nation and was really a highly decorated warrior. So for me to be able to be there in this space with his family, with his sister, with the tribal chairman and the rest of the council, and with the governor was incredibly powerful. We've been serving in the military for an incredibly long time. We serve in higher numbers than any other racial or ethnic group, and having this recognition, it is overdue. So it felt like an opportunity for celebration, but candidly an opportunity for healing in many ways too.
You mentioned that Master Chief Fairbanks' sister was there. What were the conversations like with her about the recognition for her family? And what did she say that her brother's reaction would have been if he were still around to receive this honor?
She was incredibly kind and gracious and humble, and it sounds like that is what runs in the family. He was a man who's absolutely dedicated to service. And the thing that we heard over and over again from people who knew him was how he didn't expect to get the credit when he did the work. He just showed up and did the work to care for people and for the community. And I think that's powerful. There, we opened the ceremony in a good way with a prayer and a song, and the things that continued to really just come up were the 7 grandfather teachings, and how he lived those out every single day. But it sounds like, again, he was a pretty humble man, but also the Navy knows how to do ceremony. Boy, like it was, I think so. Being a CB and being, this leader in the Navy, I think would have also probably appreciated just the pomp and circumstance of, of this ceremony. It was, again, quite powerful, very moving, but it just was really special. And I think the last thing that I'll say about, like, one of the things that I found so moving is one of the things that the governor said. He said, here we are in this space. I'm the governor from, Minnesota, with my lieutenant governor, who's a member of the White Earth Nation, but also representing a state where the largest mass execution in this country's history occurred in Mankato, the Dakota 38+2. And he said, but the quarry rock that built the National Museum of the American Indian came from Mankato, the very community, right, where that mass hanging occurred. And so, again, coming back to just this notion of the recognition, but also the healing that is occurring. And I think things like this will continue to help us heal when we're recognized, and we're truly seen, I think, and honored for the commitment and sacrifice of our men and women who are warriors.
Again, that was Minnesota Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan speaking about the legacy of Master Chief James D. Fairbanks. In case you are curious, Navajo-class ships are salvage and rescue vessels that are capable of towing large U.S. Navy ships and have around 6,000 square feet of deck space. All of these ships are traditionally named after prominent Native veterans or Native tribes.
We are all children born of water. It is where all life begins. Water embraces and protects us. We revere it in our homes. We need to live close to water. It nourishes and cleanses us. All living things know this. Sometimes water is gentle and floats in the air. Sometimes water is harsh and powerful. Sometimes it catches the sun's rays. Water changes with the seasons, alive and always moving, even when no one is looking. Water is patient. Water endures. Water brings clarity. Water purifies our thoughts. Water brings us together. Water is holy. Water helps us heal. Water is medicine.
Giminogijigad Bijinago. It was a good day yesterday. Giminogijigad Bijinago. The word gi is used when we're talking about past tense. The word minogijigad means that it is a good day, and Bijinago is talking about yesterday. And when we put all three of them together, we have Giminogijigad Bijinago. It was a good day yesterday.
James and Ernie are a Dene comedy duo that has been entertaining Indian country for decades. While the pair still performs together, each has taken their own path. ICT Shirley Snavy has this interview with James Junes.
Give me a Apache Frappuccino. You know what I mean? What size? Husky. They're all husky.
All large.
That's
all
right.
large sizes. And you could make like a nice menu just like that too.
Hold on a second. Can't read the menu.
Hey.
Okay, there's...
You don't wear glasses.
Yeah, I don't.
Started off doing stand-up comedy and traveled throughout Indian country and made a lot of headway everywhere. In 23 years, and I feel like at 23 years, I'm barely scratching the surface. So that kind of led me to not doing, I still do the comedy duo and the troupe, but I was like, okay, there's something else, a story that needs to be told that's on the back end of all of this. What is the turban for all of this? How do I, because every stand-up comic has a message. If you listen to them closely, you see D.L. Hughley or you see Charlie Hill, they always had a message of something. What that is, that's always up to the audience to try to figure out. But for me, I was like, okay, there's a different story here. There's a story of coming from domestic violence and alcoholism and drug addiction, and how do we overcome these things to be a success. I really reflected back on what our elders had taught. And that's where I started coming up with humor healing. How is this beneficial to not just me personally, but as Native country, and then Native country turned into something that was worldwide. There was one that I really come across, and I finally got it. I finally got it after reading the history books about Native America. I finally got the wisdom of why Chief Joseph chose to say that from where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever. He picked up his weapon of peace. He knew that peace was going to save his people. He knew that peace was going to be the longevity of his people. And he knew that mentality was going against everything that he had heard. People probably said, you know what, we should fight. We should keep fighting. We should keep fighting. Go down with the ship kind of thing. But he was like, no, if our people are going to survive, I'm going to have to lay down my weapon. I'm going to have to step into the spiritual side of all of this, about the things that I've been taught, that our Native American philosophy is always to choose peace. People are wanting, they're not willing, they want this sense of hope where they can ingest it, where they can transform themselves. Maybe it's not going to be the whole antidote for the things that they want, but at least it's something to give them hope in the right direction for themselves, using the things that I've been through, like domestic violence and drug addiction and the mental health of it, surviving cancer. I mean, I had cancer twice, and that was a battle in itself. But all of these things the experiences were conducive to what the survival is of who I am today. So now I do half comedy, half message, and it's being embraced more and more.
I'll lose these things. I was wondering why Sam's Club has a 30-pack of these things. It's because you lose these stupid things. And when you don't lose them, you're wearing them on your head.
How'd you come up with this career in the first place?
By accident. It was one of those things where everybody always said, oh man, you're funny, you should do something with it. And for me, I was like, nah, that's for people, that's not for us. Because we really had no example of somebody who has crossed that line, so to speak. For natives, it's always by example. Somebody has to do it first, then we'll explore that. And I was scared. I was scared to do it. How do you step out with faith and knowing that this is going to work or this is not going to work? And that's part of my story, is that the only way you'll know is if you step into it. Even if you fail, at least you'll know something. The Creator has a way. If we step into that, there it is, step into that mentality that Creator has a way. But if we think that it's our way, then it's something different.
That is a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.